Egypt, with its mysteries and a history spanning over 3,000 years, is a land that enchants us, taking us back to a glorious past where more than 300 pharaohs ruled the greatest empire of their time. Among these pharaohs, one stands out as truly different. In fact, her reign was synonymous with peace, prosperity, and artistic and architectural innovation. She is Pharaoh Hatshepsut, a ruler unlike any other because she was a woman. She ruled Egypt for 22 years, the only female pharaoh to achieve such a long and prosperous reign. Her era became a source of inspiration for women, and she remains one of the greatest pharaohs of ancient Egypt. But how did a woman ascend to the highest position in an empire traditionally ruled by men? Hatshepsut came to power through a coup, seizing the throne that was already occupied. She carefully planned her path to become the sole ruler of Egypt. Don't forget to support us, my friend. Please subscribe to the channel and like the video. In 2007, the Secretary General of the Supreme Council of Antiquities in Egypt stated that he was certain he had identified the mummy of Hatshepsut. However, this view is not shared by scientists who were astonished by this conclusion, as the burial position was associated with a king. Therefore, it is not expected that she would be buried in this manner. Investigating Hatshepsut's life takes us on a wonderful journey to the past, over 3,500 years ago. Why was her name erased from history? Why were her monuments systematically defaced? Who is responsible for this? The persecution of the Queen is part of an effort to rewrite history. Through statements from witnesses, we uncover the truth about this extraordinary ruler. We gained insight into her personality, which is rare in ancient Egyptian history. If I could meet someone from ancient Egypt, it would be Hatshepsut. It is time to solve the remarkable riddle of the Pharaoh Queen. In 2007, in Cairo, the Minister of State for Antiquities, Zahi Hawass, held a conference where he made a stunning announcement. I can tell you that this is the most important discovery since the discovery of Tutankhamun in the Valley of the Kings. He revealed the identification of the mummy of one of the greatest rulers of the ancient world, known as Hatshepsut. This statement sparked debate and raised doubts among many Egyptologists. Could this mummy truly be Hatshepsut, or might it belong to someone else? The evidence presented by Zahi Hawass was remarkable, but when analyzed scientifically, it proved inconclusive. Why then is there so much interest in Hatshepsut? Specialists agree that she was one of the most prominent rulers of the ancient era, yet she remains unfamiliar to many. To understand this, we must return to the period when the world rediscovered her existence. In the 19th century, an obsession with Egyptian antiquities captivated the West. People were eager to learn everything they could about this civilization and unravel its secrets. All of this became possible thanks to Champollion's groundbreaking discovery. By deciphering the hieroglyphs, he gave the pharaohs a voice. He was the first to read the hieroglyphic inscriptions, and everything he encountered during his travels in Egypt brought a wealth of new knowledge. Champollion discovered the temple of Deir el-Bahari, which at the time was covered in sand. He observed depictions of two pharaohs, which was astonishing, as it was unusual to see representations of two pharaohs together. What surprised him even more was that one of these pharaohs was referred to in the feminine form. This revelation left him in great confusion, as it suggested that this pharaoh was a woman. This woman was none other than Hatshepsut. It takes 20 years to uncover more secrets of this temple on the west bank of the Nile. During the cleaning of the second terrace, archaeologists discovered inscriptions that take us back more than 3,500 years. There is an important collection of inscriptions in Deir el-Bahari, known as the lineage of the gods, which describes the sacred conception of Hatshepsut by the god who may have been her father. The inscription, known as the Divine Union, depicts the marriage of the god Amun to Queen Hatshepsut's mother. Carved on the temple walls is a legendary scene from another era. narrating the myth of the conception of this extraordinary woman, Hatshepsut. Amun, referred to as her consort, was the king of Upper and Lower Egypt, Thutmose I. He found the queen asleep in his beautiful palace. She awoke to fragrant offerings. In truth, Amun had allowed her to see him in his divine form. His love passed into her body, and the palace was filled with a divine fragrance. She knew she was carrying a very special child. A small, hidden bump revealed her pregnancy, a truly extraordinary event. Hatshepsut was not the first queen to claim to be the daughter of Amun. However, for a pharaoh to present himself in a divine form was an exceptionally rare and bold occurrence. This divine conception was revolutionary and foretold an extraordinary destiny for Hatshepsut. It took decades before uncovering the full extent of the reign of this pharaoh. Excavations carried out by the Metropolitan Museum of Art in the early 1920s revealed more about Hatshepsut. In the early 1920s, Herbert Winlock undertook excavations on behalf of the Metropolitan Museum and made significant discoveries related to Egyptian history and art. Outside Hatshepsut's temple at Deir el-Bahari, Winlock discovered a massive pit known as Hatshepsut's Pit, filled with broken sculptures. He found himself facing a massive mystery in the form of statues of Hatshepsut that once adorned the Queen Pharaoh's temple at Deir el-Bahari. These statues appeared to have been deliberately removed and destroyed. Someone seemed intent on erasing her name from the inscriptions on the temple walls. In some cases, they even gouged out her eyes to obliterate her gaze. But who wanted to hide her memory, and why? In 1961, a Polish team began excavating the temple to free it from the sands. During the cleaning and restoration of its corridors, Hatshepsut emerged once more in her story, carved into the walls, dating back over 3,500 years. At the beginning of the New Kingdom, Egypt entered an era of prosperity following a long period of turmoil. Egypt had been occupied by foreign rulers known as the Hyksos, who governed northern Egypt for 100 years, less than a century before Hatshepsut's reign. This was a deeply painful memory for Egyptians, as it marked the first time in their history they were ruled by foreigners. During this period, Pharaoh Ahmose I succeeded in expelling the Hyksos from the delta and reclaiming Egypt. Afterward, Thutmose I ascended the throne with the task of strengthening power and completing the mission initiated by Ahmose. He married Ahmose, who became the royal wife. After having 2 sons, they had a daughter, Hatshepsut. Her name, meaning foremost of noblewomen, reflects her parents' love for her. There could be no more fitting name for someone destined for such an extraordinary fate. Hatshepsut used the walls of her temple to narrate one of the most significant events of her youth. She recounts that her father took her, instead of one of his sons, to the Delta region in the Northern Empire to present her to the people, nobles, and gods. As a young girl, Hatshepsut accompanied her father, Pharaoh Thutmose I, to Lower Egypt, where she saw the statue of the god Amun. Amun spoke to her, proclaiming her as his daughter. Amun declared that Hatshepsut was destined to rule Egypt and was her father's heir. This announcement caused a stir within the family, as the pharaoh had chosen her as his successor. In fact, Hatshepsut played a significant role during her father's reign. As a woman, it was not expected that she would ascend the throne. However, with the early deaths of her brothers, Thutmose I had no male heir. This made the son of a secondary wife, Thutmose II, the heir. To avoid succession disputes, it was decided to marry Thutmose II, the future king, to his half-sister Hatshepsut. At the time, sibling marriage was seen as preferable to a division of power between competing branches of the royal family. For Egyptians, the ideal situation was for the throne to pass to the eldest son of the great royal wife. The lack of a male heir created a problem and raised questions about who would succeed the pharaoh. The primary purpose of this marriage was to produce a male heir, who would be seen as more legitimate since he would be born to both the son and daughter of the previous king, Thutmose I. Upon the death of Thutmose I, Thutmose II ascended the throne, with Hatshepsut by his side as great royal wife, effectively the Queen of Egypt. The great royal wife was the first and most important wife of the pharaoh, wielding political and religious authority. However, her influence was tied to her ability to produce a male heir. Being a pharaoh, on the other hand, meant holding supreme power. Unfortunately, as had occurred during Hatshepsut's father's time, the great royal wife did not bear a son but a daughter named Neferure. Meanwhile, Thutmose II fathered a son, the future Thutmose III, with a secondary wife. After a short reign, Thutmose II died at the age of 25. His young son, Thutmose III, succeeded him as the new pharaoh. However, the child was only 4 years old, far too young to rule. Although crowned with the title of king, he required a regent to govern on his behalf. With the approval of the ruling elite, Hatshepsut took on the role of regent alongside Thutmose III until he reached an age suitable for ruling. As the daughter of Thutmose I and his wife, Hatshepsut was a strong candidate for this position. The power of the greatest civilization in the world now rested in the hands of a child. Would Hatshepsut, who had grown up with her father's dreams of achieving greatness, remain in the shadow of this child? To understand this, we go to Sahel Island near Aswan. In the Aswan region, at a large granite quarry, there is a very unusual and rare inscription. It depicts Hatshepsut as a strong woman and the Queen of Egypt, but she is shown alongside the chief architect named Senenmut. From this inscription, we learn that Hatshepsut ordered the construction of a pair of obelisks. This is remarkable and unprecedented. One must be an Egyptologist to fully appreciate the boldness represented by this engraved image in Aswan. These are massive monuments, and no one but a pharaoh could undertake such large-scale projects. Traditionally, the pharaoh would dictate orders for constructing a building or erecting an obelisk. However, Hatshepsut commissioned the construction of the 2 obelisks in her name, not in the name of Thutmose III. We can see her overwhelming ambition as she is about to ascend the steps of the pharaoh's throne. Hatshepsut assumed a position that was not rightfully hers, and if she intended to seize power, she could have dispensed with her stepson, Thutmose III. Perhaps Hatshepsut was very thirsty for power and did not like Thutmose III, her stepson. Maybe she did not care much for him. To understand the reason, let us go to the Karnak Temple and the Nigari Minu Temple, which was built by Hatshepsut's orders. When Thutmose III ascended to the throne in ill health, she did not give him enough time to transition into power. Instead, she sent him to join a military school here in the south of the capital, in the city of Thebes. Everything was under her control. Once the pharaoh was out of the way, Hatshepsut saw herself as the sole rightful figure to appear in temple inscriptions as the ruler. To consolidate her power, she had to dispense with several agreements, including assuming a throne already occupied. As a regent, her authority had limits, and one day Thutmose III would demand his legitimate right. To justify her seizure of power before the Egyptians, Hatshepsut needed the support of the greatest authority, the gods. The only way to become a pharaoh was to be appointed by the god Amun himself. In the Karnak temple, north of ancient Thebes, the walls of the Red Chapel, built by Hatshepsut, reveal other secrets and tell us of prophecies. Another source used to legitimize her rule. Hatshepsut utilized prophecies in which the god Amun appeared to her. Hatshepsut recounts an extraordinary story that occurred before she assumed power. During the festival of the god Amun would leave his temple in Karnak, located in Thebes, and travel in a procession to Luxor temple. Amun would be seated in a small shrine carried by priests, according to ritual. The god would increase the weight of his shrine on the priest's shoulders, signaling which direction he wanted them to go, left or right. Along the way, the god Amun appeared, though no one could see him as he remained within his shrine. Suddenly, the shrine's bearers came to a halt, as though a hidden force had frozen them in place. The shrine tilted toward Hatshepsut. The priests and onlookers were stunned. The god spoke to the queen in this pivotal moment. She quickly stepped forward and knelt before her father, the god saying, "What do you want me to do to protect Egypt?" The shrine tilted again toward her, expressing Amun's approval. The god declared her pharaoh. To us, this seems like an elaborate trick, with the priests controlling the shrine's movements to install Hatshepsut as pharaoh. But to the ancient Egyptians, it was entirely different. The people of that time were compelled to go along with and believe in the priest's display. Thus, Hatshepsut was crowned queen. For some, her coronation was seen as a crime, and they sought to erase her from history, obliterating her memory and even her image. But what did the queen's face look like, this woman they tried so hard to erase? We had to head to the Hatshepsut Hall at the Metropolitan Museum to see clearer statues of her, but each face looked different from the other. So what did she actually look like? At the beginning of Hatshepsut's reign, we see that she carried the facial features of her father. Her face appeared ordinary and was painted yellow, as women's statues in Egyptian iconography were painted yellow, while men's were painted red. Later, Hatshepsut's statues took on a more masculine appearance, with her face changing significantly. She was depicted with a sharper, more pointed chin, a narrower face, alert facial expressions, almond-shaped eyes and high arched eyebrows, which gave her a commanding presence and greater authority. This face seems to appear out of nowhere, and we often tried to see Hatshepsut's real features in it. But this depiction is not the most astonishing one. As showcased in the Metropolitan Museum's collection, what captures the attention of visitors is the apparent transformation of Hatshepsut from queen to king. At the start of her reign as pharaoh, it is evident that she was content to be represented as a woman, both a woman and a pharaoh. However, over time, her feminine traits began to disappear. What happened? Perhaps we see an iconic transformation taking place rapidly, as if Hatshepsut was changing inside a cocoon, gradually shedding her feminine appearance to become more masculine. Her depictions became increasingly androgynous, eventually abandoning her feminine nature altogether. Hatshepsut did not hide the fact that she was a woman and always used feminine pronouns. She was simply Her Majesty the Queen. Although there were female pharaohs in Egyptian history, they were exceptional cases. Among 345 pharaohs over 3,000 years, only 5 were women, and Hatshepsut was the only one who ruled for an extended period, about 22 years. However, the reason behind her transformations might lie elsewhere. One of the methods a pharaoh used to solidify their authority was the construction of temples and monuments. architectural landmarks that were more magnificent than those of their predecessors. The Egyptians believed that the completion of such projects by the pharaoh was a result of the god's support for them. In fact, she was preoccupied with restoring, rebuilding, and repairing the works of her predecessors. In addition to this, she laid the foundation for something much greater that lasted beyond her reign. This gives us a sense that Hatshepsut was a legitimate pharaoh. Hatshepsut commissioned her architect, Senenmut, to oversee the construction of her mortuary temple at the rock terrace of Deir el-Bahari. Known as the Temple of Millions of Years, this structure is a masterpiece of New Kingdom architecture. It provides a detailed narrative of her life as a pharaoh and glorifies her reign. Hatshepsut left her mark on history, particularly through the monuments she built, such as the Deir el-Bahari Temple. It remains one of the most visited temples in Egypt. The temple measures 275 meters in length and 105 meters in width, and its size is impressive. The inner sanctuary, or Holy of Holies, is a columned structure that sits atop a series of terraces. It is accessible via long ramps surrounded by gardens and was designed to accommodate the religious processions held by Hatshepsut. Directly opposite lies the Karnak Temple, the main residence of the god Amun. Hatshepsut had redesigned part of the Karnak Temple. Hatshepsut alone had grand ambitions for Amun's temple in Karnak. It seems she planned extensively, not only for her temple at Deir el-Bahari. The queen had a comprehensive program to reinforce her legitimacy as a pharaoh. This extensive building program required employing tens of thousands of workers. Hatshepsut built more than others, second only to Ramesses II, despite his longer reign. The construction of the Speos Artemidos was specifically intended to affirm Hatshepsut's authority. It is a temple carved into the rock in the middle of the desert, topped with a long inscription stretching over 22 marble columns. This text addresses both the gods and humans. What can be read today is what we would call a declaration of her faith, affirming her authority through an expressive inscription. She depicted herself as a strong woman, seeking to reassure her people. O princes, O people, listen to this. I have restored what was destroyed, even that which had grown old during the time of the Hyksos, who roamed the delta in a state of chaos and destroyed our temples. Now I sit on the throne of the sun, as it was foretold that I would ascend one day. I have come as the sun god Horus, breathing fire upon my enemies. These heinous acts will never be repeated. When the sun disk rises, it will cast its rays upon my embodiment, and my falcon will soar high above the palaces of princes forever. She affirmed her right to rule through the monuments she constructed. One of the obelisks she erected at Karnak carries a message confirming her authority, stating, "All foreign lands are my servants." Many men accompanied Hatshepsut, but one stood out more than the others: Senenmut, her architect and the tutor of her only child, her beloved daughter Neferura. Hatshepsut needed believers in her vision to establish herself as a dominant queen of Egypt, and Senenmut was one of them. Senenmut bore many titles, over 90 in fact, which reflects his extraordinary prominence. He appears to have been one of the queen's most devoted supporters. Interestingly, there are no records of him having a wife or children. He was likely slightly older than Hatshepsut when she became pharaoh. One of Senenmut's tombs, built near Hatshepsut's temple, provides more insight into their relationship. A passageway in his tomb leads to a chamber beneath Hatshepsut's temple, a testament to their close connection. In ancient Egypt, being buried near a pharaoh was a great honor. The walls of his tomb contain inscriptions praising Hatshepsut, emphasizing his role as her most loyal aide. Many believe he was her lover, though others argue their bond was more of a mentor-student relationship, as there may have been a significant age difference between them. Speculation about their relationship persists, but if Hatshepsut had been a male pharaoh, such questions might never have arisen. Could they have been buried together, as some imagine? Or did Senenmut grow resentful of remaining in her shadow? It is evident that Senenmut was deeply loyal to the Pharaoh Queen. The monuments dedicated to him underscore his connection to Hatshepsut. However, to uncover the mystery of her disappearance, we must look elsewhere. Fast forward to the modern era, specifically the late 19th century. The French-led Antiquities Department in Cairo realized that artifacts bearing the names of pharaohs were being sold in antiquities markets. These items were not found in known tombs. A young assistant, Heinrich Brugsch, went to Luxor to investigate. He discovered that 3 brothers had stumbled upon a royal cache and were selling its treasures. Brugsch descended into the burial site and uncovered numerous mummies, most of them still in coffins. Through the inscriptions on these coffins, it became evident that they contained the great kings of the New Kingdom, the most glorious period in pharaonic history. This tomb holds mummies of New Kingdom rulers one after another. It is undoubtedly one of the most magnificent discoveries, comparable to the tomb of Tutankhamun. The tomb contains no fewer than 40 mummies, not just any mummies, but those of kings and queens, hidden by priests to protect them from systematic looting in the Valley of the Kings. Without a doubt, many famous figures rest in the coffins within this massive ancient tomb. It is astonishing to behold such an incredible discovery in the history of archaeology. Among them lies one of the greatest pharaohs, Ramses II, preserved in the form of a mummy. Though mummified, his body is remarkably well preserved. This moment is an extraordinary one in the annals of ancient history. Most of the royal mummies are in coffins bearing their names, making them easy to identify. However, Hatshepsut is not among them. Only a box bearing her name and containing some embalmed organs was found. Inside this tomb lies a canopic box inscribed with Mut-Kare, the throne name of Queen Pharaoh Hatshepsut. This box, known as a canopic jar, contained one of her embalmed organs, along with a tooth that perhaps awaited discovery for years. In that era, Egypt resembled the Wild West, rife with thieves and treasure hunters. The authorities lacked the means to secure the antiquities. Heinrich had little time to catalogue everything, so they decided to move the mummies to the Cairo Museum as quickly as possible. After discovering the royal cache, a large-scale rescue operation was launched to save the historical relics. The coffins and mummies were transported to Cairo overnight on boats in what resembled a royal procession, swiftly organized to transfer these great kings and queens of Egyptian history. Soon, rumors spread among Egyptians about the discovery of the ancient kings and queens. The people of Western Thebes gathered in mourning to witness the departure of the dead. They were in deep sorrow, grieving profoundly for them. Crowds flocked to this spectacular scene on the Nile River, and the public enthusiasm reached its peak. The Egyptians took pride in celebrating their pharaohs. This event found a Western echo 150 years later, in April 2021, during the Golden Parade of the Pharaohs in Cairo. The Egyptian government decided to transfer the royal mummies to the new National Museum of Egyptian Civilization. The process of moving the mummies turned into a grand spectacle, placing the mummies center stage to enhance Egyptians' sense of national identity. The event captured global media attention and prompted people to think about royal mummies for the first time in a long while. It is important to remember that ancient Egyptians performed similar spectacular ceremonies. Among the mummies transferred were Ramses II, Ramses I, and Thutmose III. The procession was awe-inspiring, featuring famous names, including Hatshepsut. Finally, Hatshepsut, the pharaoh long sought by archaeologists, was there. Forgotten for 3,500 years, Hatshepsut has now ascended to the ranks of the greatest pharaohs. This recognition is gratifying for her and for us as archaeologists. She finally holds her rightful place among Egypt's monarchs. But is that truly the mummy of Hatshepsut? To uncover more, we must return to explore the tomb Hatshepsut built in the Valley of the Kings near the temple at Deir el-Bahari. It was the first tomb carved into the Valley of the Kings, making her a pioneer of royal burials in this site. Her tomb may be one of the most famous in the ancient world and a defining feature of the New Kingdom. Hatshepsut sought to be buried alongside her father, Thutmose I, to solidify her legitimacy. For this reason, she constructed her tomb in the Valley of the Kings, intending to lie beside him in death. Here begins her journey to the afterlife. It is a majestic and awe-inspiring scene. This tomb, known to Egyptologists as KV20, is vast in scale, reflecting the era of Hatshepsut. It is 5 times larger than the tomb of Tutankhamun, and if it had not been looted, it would have been filled with astonishing treasures. Descending into the 200-meter-long and 100-meter-deep tunnel, Egyptologists experience the same thrill as its early explorers. The excitement lies in the possibility of finding a treasure, a mummy, or even a ghost. It's a place that sparks the imagination. In fact, the renowned archaeologist Howard Carter explored Tomb 20 and discovered 2 stone sarcophagi bearing the names of Hatshepsut and her father, Thutmose I. It is believed that Hatshepsut expanded her father's original tomb to include herself as a king, insisting that she be buried there. The Queen's red quartzite sarcophagus was found empty and is now in the Cairo Museum. Scholars are uncertain whether the Queen was ever buried there. The pharaohs who succeeded her followed her example and were buried in the Valley of the Kings, further evidence of Hatshepsut's influence on the destiny of ancient Egypt. This pharaoh left an indelible mark on history. So how did she become so forgotten? At the beginning of the 20th century, archaeologist Howard Carter discovered a new tomb just a few meters away from Hatshepsut's tomb. Entering with confidence that he would uncover treasures, he was disappointed to find it looted long ago. To whom did this tomb belong? In 1906, Carter excavated in the Valley of the Kings and found a tomb containing 2 women whom he initially believed were wet nurses and thus of little importance. The true identity of these women, however, remains a mystery. Based on inscriptions on one of the coffins, Carter speculated that one of the women was Si-Ra-In, known as Hatshepsut's nurse. The other mummy, whose left arm was crossed over her chest, a royal gesture, suggests she was a queen. What if Howard Carter unknowingly discovered the remains of Hatshepsut? The identification of Hatshepsut's mummy is a complex story. By the end of the 20th century, as her reign became more widely known, many Egyptologists began to question, where is Hatshepsut? In the late 1980s, American scholar Elizabeth Thomas suggested that one of the mummies found in KV60 might be Queen Hatshepsut. Expert theories indicate that by 1069 BCE, Egypt faced widespread looting by tomb robbers. To protect her remains, the priests of Amun hid her body in the tomb of her nurse, Si-Ra-In. However, archaeologist Zahi Hawass initially doubted that this mummy belonged to Hatshepsut. He was surprised by its obesity, noting the sagging breasts, and agreed with Howard Carter's opinion from 80 years prior that the mummy likely belonged to a nursemaid. In 2007, a groundbreaking announcement was made in Egyptology. Zahi Hawass held a press conference, reversing his earlier claims. He confirmed that the mummy found in the tomb of Hatshepsut's nurse was in fact the Queen's. In a documentary, Hawass revealed the discovery of a small funerary box containing the pharaoh's internal organs. This box bore Hatshepsut's name and contained mummified remains and a human tooth. Egyptologists analyzed the box and found that the tooth fit into a gap in the molar of the KV60 mummy's skull. Hawass regarded this as conclusive evidence that the mummy was Hatshepsut. However, this sparked debates among scholars. Were the box's contents genuine? The box had been reused and contained residues of a liquid once used for treating the liver or spleen, suggesting it might not be related to Hatshepsut. DNA testing was conducted, but the results were not disclosed, leaving uncertainty about the identification. While the evidence presented by Zahi Hawass is intriguing, scientific analyses suggest it is not definitive. A problem with this theory is the positioning of the mummy's arms, which suggests it belonged to a queen. Yet some argue that Hatshepsut was regarded as a pharaoh, not merely a queen, at the time of her death. This raises doubts about whether the identified body truly belongs to Hatshepsut. The fate of her body remains an open question. The mummy displayed in the museum may not belong to Hatshepsut, and some archaeologists are almost certain that the tooth was deliberately placed in the funerary box. The absence of Hatshepsut from official depictions 22 years after her coronation is considered evidence of her death. No trace of the queen remains. Thutmose III found himself on the throne at the age of 25 to 30, beginning his independent reign following Hatshepsut's death. Initially, Thutmose III handled her legacy cautiously, avoiding tarnishing her memory while also refraining from mentioning her. His confidence grew over time, thanks to the training he had received under his aunt's guidance. He led 16 military campaigns, earning the title Napoleon of Ancient Egypt, and continued to consolidate the empire that would later be ruled by Seti I, Ramses II, and other notable pharaohs. After Hatshepsut's death, it became clear that she had meticulously prepared Thutmose III for his role as king. He had already assumed the throne when he led his first military campaign, a testament to the training and preparation he had received under Hatshepsut. This early readiness to lead a military campaign was a result of her mentorship and guidance. However, 24 years after Hatshepsut's death, Thutmose III changed his stance and ordered the erasure of all references to her reign. Her images were defaced, her royal names obliterated, and her statues destroyed or vandalized. Thutmose III likely saw the period during which he was under his aunt's regency as a grey area in his otherwise illustrious rule. As a great pharaoh, he could not accept the idea of a regent queen ascending to the status of pharaoh. This belief fueled his determination to obliterate all depictions and statues of Hatshepsut, ensuring that such a precedent would not be repeated. What Thutmose III did was erase all traces of Hatshepsut as pharaoh, rewriting history as if there had only been his grandfather, his father, and himself, with no mention of Hatshepsut's existence as a ruler. Perhaps it was not just Hatshepsut herself that unsettled Thutmose III, but also her perspective on power. She adopted a novel approach for her time, as evidenced by depictions showing her alongside her daughter, Neferura, in numerous inscriptions, a practice that was unusual for the Egyptians. These depictions would have been seen as highly unconventional, if not heretical. Pharaohs were typically portrayed with their sons, not a woman with her daughter. Neferura, the queen's only known child, had a prominent status. It is possible that Hatshepsut was grooming her daughter for a significant role, perhaps even to succeed her. This raises the question, was Hatshepsut inclined toward establishing a matriarchal system, passing power from mother to daughter rather than from father to son? Another element supporting this theory is Neferura's title as the daughter of Amun. Hatshepsut appeared to be paving the way for her daughter to take power. It is conceivable that she intended to establish a female dynasty, as evidenced by her insistence on prominently including Neferura in royal imagery. In fact, the reign of Hatshepsut and the pivotal role of her daughter Neferua could be seen as the foundation of a matriarchal system in Egyptian royalty, though such a system did not endure. What if Neferua had returned to claim the throne 20 years after her mother's death? Could her potential political ambitions have fueled the suppression of Hatshepsut's legacy? This remains a theory. Hatshepsut re-emerged in the early 21st century, after being nearly erased from history. Thanks to modern discoveries, we now have glimpses into her personality, a rarity in pharaonic history. Hatshepsut was truly an exceptional pharaoh in every sense of the word. Ambitious and capable, had she been a man, she would undoubtedly have been regarded as one of the great kings of ancient Egypt. In a time when women were expected to remain in the background, Hatshepsut's reign showcased her extraordinary ability to rule. Her rise to the status of pharaoh in a patriarchal society was both remarkable and unique. Though nearly erased from history, the spotlight on her in modern times has revealed her to be a significant figure. While not widely recognized in the modern era, her reign has gained global recognition over the past century. Hatshepsut has since secured her place as an enduring and celebrated figure in the history of Egypt and the world. Don't forget to support us, my friend. Please subscribe to the channel and like the video.